because you're a member of Struck Out there regardless, but if you want to be a part of the fund and it's something you're interested in, then you donate.
Yeah.
But it's also not only donating, sorry, but it's also like fundraising.
I think it's good. What we need to do is put all of these specific proposals into the doc with concrete examples and also conflicting examples.
Yeah.
And then you guys can kind of group them. But just, we can move this all with specific instances and how we envision it would work and references to pre-existing similar initiatives.
No, just to even understand which direction are we going to take this conversation further. Okay.
The structure node idea is interesting. I'm wondering, since you guys, I remember when at the end of the first year there was a lot of desire to create both leverage, the idea of having a decentralized office. Is there something we can learn more? Is there advice from how that went in terms of having people operate as a network of nodes that then somehow would realign when it's needed?
I think we were thinking of this because leverage is more an idea of having an agency, and then it had trust. It would have trust as its registered company address, but that's about it in terms of it acting as a node. We thought more of trust became a kind of informal node of the alumni network, but also knowing that there's a group in New York, but also potentially that in other cities there are potentially many alumni who don't know each other, and that looking at the RCA Design Interactions program, they have I think it works via Facebook page, and that there's different events based on different cities. And I know Sasha was maintaining the Berlin one for several years, I believe. And that's actually how I met Emma. And that they would just try to do a self-organized initiative of meetups every month or two. But also often there's informal spaces where those meetups happen. So the RCA DI one I think would usually happen at Spectrum, which was a space kind of similar to Trust in Berlin, where it would have different meetup groups and community events and whatever. So in the way that Trust kind of became an informal node, you could imagine other cities, if there's a core of alumni, they get together every month or two and there becomes a node that's a specific place.
But my point is that you guys at all, for example, the people who are part of the Leverage or Trust network who aren't in Berlin, do they feel like they're part of Trust in the sense that they can pop up a node in a different city and then it becomes a Trust event? Or what's the relation between the node, the Trust in this example? Because I think it's a good example given the fact that it is alumni. It's already another good case study for how these setups
Yeah, but I think the idea here is more that you could create this by proposing something to Striker, for example, or organizing it yourself, finding people through the directory, just creating more infrastructures to have something like that happen.
Yeah, and I think it's less that it would be popping up a Trust node somewhere else. I think it would be more Strucka X Trust in Berlin, and then Strucka X Sandberg in Amsterdam.
I'm just trying to make the parallel. If Strucka was the thing and then there was a Strucka node, is there a Trust? Is there something different? Is Trust the thing and then has a Trust node? Or in your model, in the example that
Trust is the space in Berlin established.
And again, in a similar action, probably not the best person to describe it.
I could give a quick summary of Trust because it's been floated around a bit and maybe not everyone's familiar with it. So Trust, basically in 2017, after our program ended, a bunch of us went back to Berlin. Arthur was an alumni of 2017. He'd been working out of a co-working space for a while in Schöneberg, and it turned out that the person who was renting it was giving up the lease and asked if any members of the co-working space wanted to take it over. He mulled it over for a while and eventually took it over. So it's fundamentally a co-working space, but then Callum, who was another alumni, started working there. And also Arthur and a lot of the former co-working people also stayed. But then we started doing just events there. Originally it was just a small reading group that we did on different governance things. Then we hosted Peer-to-Peer Web Berlin, several initiatives. Sam and I organized an event called Decentralization as Texture. We just started doing a bunch of events. Jelena, who was another alumni of the program, did an event talking about her work there. And also in September, when Bratton was, I think, doing a New Normal tour, he did a talk at Trust with a green screen and and it was also there was like a Datatopia thing was going on. Was that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
There was a talk.
Well, there was like some event going on in Berlin that also brought a lot of alumni to Berlin, and also second year. And the night before Bratton's talk, we had like an alumni gathering there. So it was where I met most of the second year people for the first and only time. And now it's just like, I don't know, it's kind of a locus of many different communities in Berlin, but one that at the core operationally is all pretty much Straka alumni.
Wow.
Yeah. And then you started this trust video thing as like
What's that?
thing.
Yeah, well, they wanted it to be a video platform. So, like Bratton's talk, there's like an image of Bratton with like a scary child doll behind. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah, so that comes from the talk where his slides were just projected behind him. The idea is that there's like multimedia kind of events where there's talks, but then there's also like overlaid, almost like Facebook Live style events. But also the idea, I mean, I'm a little bit critical of it actually, to be honest, but it's the idea also that you have avatars and characters and you can speak through avatars. But it's just been in production for a while, but it aims to be like a kind of custom platform for talks and video viewing. And interlinked with Discord, but it's been in the works for a while, let's say.
Berlin's kicking ass. We're just meeting for dinners. We want to sell up in knowledge.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's that, and you should come by when you're in Berlin. But so yeah, it's just become like an informal node, and like Maxi, who was another alumni of 2017, he was visiting Berlin last week. He's staying at my place while away, but the first place he went to was Trust when he got to Berlin. So it has become a de facto kind of space.
I was more curious how the people who aren't in Berlin are making use of that network, the trust network, as opposed to imagining trust as a node struggle, which I don't think that is how we're trying to frame it. How is you guys as alumni nodes of that network? Because that's actually a good case study for how these kind of self-organized models do look at.
I think it could be a lot more effective. I think in the beginning it felt like anyone, when they're in Berlin, could propose an event. And now I think it's actually just due to, it's being recorded, operational inefficiency, that it's not more open to alumni to use it. But I think it's more of operational capacity and less to do with sentiment, if that makes sense as a coded way to say it.
Yeah.
But it's also more operated around certain topics that are not necessarily like everyone's research topics.
Yeah.
So I think this is also how it's not necessarily now a very open space.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the idea would maybe to have more of like trust, but not in a trust way. It does not even have to be institutionalized. It could just be,
I guess I'm trying to think what doesn't work, because already given the fact that the topics are similar and the community already knows each other in the case of the first year alumni, what could we learn from what doesn't work at Trust Room actually, if we were to think of Straka in similar ways, which would have these node structures that would be alumni based, what would need to be thought through for this to actually work as we want it to work? Because to me, it's usually these things are quite content based. I think that Trust works because people are interested in the same ideas. It's not a neutral platform, as in the same way that Straka potentially is not associated to this or that topic, and also the fact that the alumni come from very different range of interests.
I mean, speaking personally, I could see it as more of like a format, like the peer-to-peer web Berlin, and then peer-to-peer web New York, peer-to-peer web LA, whatever. It is very specific, and I don't think it would end up being a pan alumni brand necessarily, but you could use it in different ways, and maybe it's like a certain brand of event that's like somehow tied to Straka, and there are several different brands of events tied to Straka. But creating some kind of like co-location between Straka, where maybe live stream talks happen at this space, or like live streamed talks happen here, they're live streamed and they're viewed at another space, or one space like at Trust has an event that's live streamed and viewed here.
That's precisely the suggestion that we had with them. Which they,
We should ask them.
we have asked them to do this.
Yeah, well, I also have my own critiques at the moment. But I think that something like that is very important.
But I think more generally, I think the next step would be adding some of these suggestions, because when I see that, I think there's a lot of great material to work with, and the least thing that we want to do is just to park it and never actually come back to this. But we can also be, as we mentioned from the very beginning, in terms of transparency, we can be hyper transparent in the sense that there is not we don't want to, for all of these new initiatives, we want to make sure that we want to see them. How do we make these things happen? How do we make these events happen? As we do with roadshow talks, etc., etc. We never pay for venues. We actually find partner institutions to host our events. They kind of throw, I don't know, there's usually a bar so people can buy drinks there. So it's still not everything revolves around financial support. And I think it's hyper clear for everybody here, but also maybe not for everybody in the alumni community at large. So I think it's important to strip down some of these suggestions to the essence and what's the minimum product that we can create already now, without actually seeing that Strelka would have to put together or fund institutionally funded, but rather somehow together find fundraise if we need to get money to do these things, or actually do it without paying. Basically just there's a communication infrastructure, was an infrastructure of branding these events, or I don't know, making sure people actually learn about them and come to these places and etc.
Yeah, I mean, we can make also some specific suggestions multiple ways that could pan out, whether it's more like a TEDx format or just like in Berlin, for example, there's a project space grant, which I've been really pushing for Trust to get because it would fix a lot of the issues. But having a few international partners or other partners would help them get that grant.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, we can make specific suggestions.
Because I think there's also making that's this sense of ownership, I think, can be also kind of given to alumni to implement some of these suggestions, because a lot of these ideas sound great, but they require Strelka in terms of capacity of the team is not going to scale very much. So the team is the people that work here, work within education. So some of these things it's impossible to do if everything kind of one person needs to co-organize and communicate about everything. But if it's distributed and some people take ownership of this is kind of the way to make this happen, and I'll try to pioneer at least this one thing for the next, kind of be the owner of this idea and of this project, to take it a bit further. And of course, and we, us being the key points of contact, the team, the educational team here, because the reason it's our team is because the domain of expert, this is everything we're discussing over the past 2 days is within education at large, because this is kind of the core of what Strelka is doing. And I think some of the things, it's especially with the ball, is clearly we're going to synthesize both from this and from the conversation that we'll have with the students, and then we'll have tomorrow on Monday as well. So then some things will actually find its way into the ball for sure. And the question is, once again, how much and how much capacity do you actually have to be involved, and if you want to be involved, or only in a specific part of the ball that you would like to, for example, only take part in helping to put together the networking event or a conference event. That's kind of an open question still, and we don't want to force anything. It isn't now this committee has to be in charge of the networking event. It's more if you would like to take ownership of this event, super we would like to do this and help coordinate it and organize this and make sure everybody else who wants to be involved is part of this conversation. And I actually found the conversation about online today particularly helpful, because we've been so much talking about this internally in between 4 or 5 people. That is just the way we talk about it makes so much sense to us, but the questions that you immediately start asking when this is presented to you kind of shifts completely the perception, how it's perceived outside of the small group of 4 people who've talked about this for some time, and it made just so much sense before, and now it's making a lot less sense, and now you just understand how much this needs to be reframed or rethought, just to kind of, or at least present it differently and communicate it differently, because sometimes we mean maybe similar things, but the way we talk about them in different ways. So that's been just all of these questions from earlier. I'm still starting to process this information, because it's going to change, I think, the directional for sure.
I think everything that we proposed here is somehow comes back to bringing the network together and having people do things together. It does not need money necessarily.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just creating an infrastructure and an identity that makes you, relate to each other, and to open up these opportunities. And then applying for these fundings is not an issue.
Yeah.
You just have to have the initial.
I know, but that's how do we now? Because you can blow it up so it's hyper complex and becomes this great initiative that never gets done, or you can strip it down to simple, I think, kind of simple projects that we can push forward just because they make sense, and there's people who genuinely want to be involved,
I
And
think
what,
that would be the idea until the next meeting to kind of maybe distribute this or like maybe work together on this details of these proposals.
Can I-
mean, I even see here just like each one of these slides almost being a working group.
Yeah.
And then by the next like hangout call, we should, I think also because like we're how many people, we obviously also ourselves can all do this, but keeping in mind people that we know from different cohorts that we would like to invite into these specific working groups.
yeah.
Like I know that's what you're suggesting, but also like at the beginning of the meeting yesterday, it was like we should define ownership. So I totally see that we need like ownership and carrying forward and like concrete next steps because
Yeah.
this is a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
But-
And this is also why it's just good to understand the scope of the committee somehow. And it's especially for this point of ownership, I guess. Like, what can we actually bring into the discussion? How much space is there?
I mean, I
How
see.
much do you want us involvement?
I mean, all of the things that you have listed, they seem to be directly relevant to what we want you guys to be involved in these questions. That's why we're part of this. I have a kind of a random question. It's not super high level, but can we go back to the alumni directory and I just try to understand this a little bit? So this is, if the way I understood it, this is the directory that becomes open to all of the alumni to actually access and see updated profiles of everybody.
Like alumni to alumni.
You wouldn't feel any reservations about people that you've never to kind of have all of this data available in this format and be able
It
to.
could be profiles that you can edit yourself. They don't have to have your educational background,
Credentials.
but they could be, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm interested in. I look for this and that. I mean, it can be more on this level and not necessarily putting the CVs there.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering because we have the alumni directory, which is super extensive because we go to everybody's LinkedIn page just to see where people are working. For those who are updated, we go to people's Facebook pages just to see like what's their like latest place where they're working, kind of to keep some of this information updated because we send up a couple of times requests to everybody like, guys, do you want to update your profiles on the website, for example? And some people reply, maybe 10 out of 300 reply and say, okay, cool, can you update this in my profile on Strelka.com, which we do. But we are trying to keep kind of a living document, but it's hyper internal. We don't share it with anybody, even like the institute, because it's a lot of like private data that people may not want to just share so openly.
Just to give you an example, first of all, this could be integrated with Strelka profiles on the website. Like, I never got an email to update my profile since
You just maybe went to spam, but
6 years ago,
newsletters.
whatever, right? Like, we could integrate the current Strelka.com profiles into this.
That's a good
So
idea.
Then people would be even more inclined to update them because there's like a practical reason why you would want to stay updated to all the opportunities. And second, like, I feel like the Facebook group is great. Like, there are over 300 people, right? But it's not really effective because not everybody's on Facebook at all times. Like, there's so many opportunities being posted there with you that I missed just because I'm never there, right? And here you can like choose to stay updated by email. You can like you know that this is the Strelka place where you could always see what's going on, what's happening, like who else is there, or just like keep updated on the people.
But that to be only available to alumni, I'm assuming.
By login.
So there's like public profile of alumni that everybody sees like right now, like
This
this.
should be like login.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
So there is a public version of a profile similar to what it is available right now, but there's also like a private version only by login where you can also see opportunities and like grants, etc.
What's
Was the,
CMS on the current website?
it's just on Airtable?
The whole website.
No, it's the CMS for the current version. I don't know.
Okay. Sorry, just went.
I thought you meant the directory that we were talking about.
No, it's also
It's the entire website is on Airtable.
I'm gonna get a little bit technical, but if it was something like a WordPress, you could do limited access permissions.
No, yeah.
So it'd be like super easy to flip that over because I think this is important, but I also probably wouldn't want to see like a whole new platform,
Yeah, it seems like this online education turning into like platform and then like into social network.
But you think a website would be like a Strelka website would be the best place to have this information regarding calls and the directory for everybody?
I feel like first of all the opportunities that are exclusive to Strelka alumni is great, right?
Where would those opportunities come? You mean that we would curate opportunities only for Strelka alumni?
No, we would post. Like, say I work at Ome, right? And I want to hire someone. Like,
It's kind of the placement,
first
sort of.
place I would post would be like, hey, choose to be subscribed. We could also like sync it with LinkedIn with an ability to like tick on and off what you want to show.
Mm.
For me, it would be more like getting to know people from the other years and finding synergies.
Sure.
But I guess it could have different purposes.
And some of the calls, and you mean the curated calls, for example, when we get whatever, some of them that are posted right now on Facebook would also go there as more general, like open calls for grant, like residencies, et cetera, that are we trying to sometimes disseminate, but we don't want to like spam too much. So we're now just posting them on Facebook, and they would also live on the website.
Yeah, well, I think if we really go forward with it, like in your settings, you could choose like I want to be notified about jobs, about grant opportunities, about like, research opportunities, and you can indicate what you're interested in getting in your inbox. If we're getting grant.
And research theme based groups, I'm just wondering why you put them in the alumni directory as a category.
This was more this kind of idea with the study groups to
Yeah.
give them somehow. I mean, they have to start somewhere, and you don't necessarily know about anyone beyond your year. Maybe if you're lucky, you know.
So this is more related to the tags that you've suggested.
I guess text, for example. I personally would be more interested to reach out to people individually that I'm interested in, not as much in grant applications or in jobs, for example, but to establish more context and talk to people that are interested in similar things. To eventually maybe research something together, think about teaching inputs, these kind of things.
Mm. What do you think are the best communication channels? Because I think the most frequent comment that we receive as an institute is that